This is the FitnessFest podcast, highlighting health and fitness professionals across the globe and giving you the tools for growth. Let's start the show. Hello, health and fitness professionals. My name is Tyler Valencia, and this is the FitnessFest podcast, the podcast showing you, health and fitness professionals, different opportunities within the industry and how to essentially carve out your own path. Today, we have a great guest on hand, somebody that I've got the opportunity to meet over the years that has really carved out their own path, and exactly what we talked about with starting this podcast, with bringing in individuals that might have started somewhere else, come to the health and fitness industry, and have really just exploded on the scene. So today we have Tyler Yearby, somebody that I've actually met through an organization called Kettlebell Concepts. And we'll talk about that stuff today. But how are you doing today, Tyler?
Doing wonderful. I appreciate you having me on, Tyler. I'm looking forward to it. But beautiful day here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I'm looking forward to being on.
Awesome. So let's kick this off nice and quickly. Can you give us kind of your story in fitness and kind of just background on yourself? Like what got you involved with your area of sport performance and, even just the education part, all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine most of the listeners are the same way, or you will have this, but the story can become rather lengthy as you develop in the industry. But so I'll apologize ahead of time for a longer story maybe than needed, but I think it'll kind of shine some light on some areas that are opportunities for a lot. So let's see. I've been in the industry for a little over 13 years. I got into the industry back in 2006. I actually was an undergrad criminal justice major. Mm-hmm. I was offered a job in the Tulsa area for the Broken Arrow Police Department. And that was what I assumed that I wanted to do, was, thrilled with the opportunity of being in law enforcement and very intrigued by that industry, and still am to a certain extent. But I was playing football in college at the time, and I happened to be given an opportunity based off of performance and everything that I'd done at the collegiate level, that I was, able to potentially entertain playing in the NFL. And so I chased that path for quite some time, and realized that God had a different plan for me, and that it was time for me to hang it up. So it was a wonderful journey, which, I look back on fondly. But essentially, I bring that up because at that time, there I was with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Northeastern State University, which is in the northeastern part of Oklahoma there. They got real creative with their name. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, I got that degree and I got finished, and, I decided that the football path wasn't going to be what was an opportunity for me. And so I was like, well, gosh, what do I want to do now? Mm-hmm. And I fortunately had taken just shy of a minor's worth of credits in nutrition. Mm-hmm. I was just interested in it. And so for my electives, I decided that's what I wanted to pursue. And so I was like, you know what? I really like movements. I like helping people. I almost hate to say this part, but I like moving myself. And I think that matters, but I don't think that that's all that matters. But that did matter for me at the time. And so I started looking into exercise science, kinesiology. And so I was living in Cincinnati, Ohio area at that time. And so I looked for different graduate assistant positions because I was pretty intrigued by working in the sport realm. And so as a strength conditioning coach or a sport movement skill acquisition coach. And so that's what I did is I ended up taking a graduate assistant position, working with the running backs, punters, kickers, and then strength and conditioning with football predominantly. And I did assist occasionally with baseball and basketball as well. Back in 2006 there at Northeastern State at my alma mater. So I moved back there. And I'm happy to fill in from essentially that time period forward. But that's what essentially drove me into it was, now I didn't have the opportunity. Do I really want to go into law enforcement? I'm intrigued by it, but I really enjoy movement and I enjoy taking care of myself. Maybe I, can have the opportunity to be blessed to help take care of other people and help people reach the goals that they're looking to achieve.
I think exactly what you're saying right there is, something came up that you're passionate about, and really, you followed it. You had two opportunities in front of you, both of them that you were very passionate about, and you ended up going in the sports science realm. But, really, they're both great opportunities for you. And I think that is exactly what we want to show listeners is that, there's different paths. Sometimes this comes up, whether it's with sport performance, group exercise, personal training, these things can pop up. And sometimes you really got to take a risk and see where it leads you. And to kind of go back with the, I know you from an educational perspective, and to give even the listeners a little bit more perspective on when you talk about skill acquisition, sport performance, can you actually dive into a little bit more on that, on kind of, it's very, I don't want to call it unique because I know it's very applicable, and it's the way that sport performance training should be going into, in my opinion. That's my professional opinion. But can you dive a little bit more into the type of training and the sport performance realm that you guys kind of work in, you and your team?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I wouldn't disagree that it's unique in the fact that it's emerging and it's growing into popularity, and it's not like it's brand new and the underpinning principles and theories have not been out there. It's just they're not as widely known to most, based off of a lot of the literature that most go through, and whether it's kinesiology, exercise science, or other. And so it really comes down to someone's view on motor learning and skill acquisition. And so whether it is more of a generalized motor program, representation, schema, rule that is imprinted somewhere in the brain to where it's, I now see something in the environment that may be a cue to me that sparks that recall recognition. There it is. I then pull out that action and I'm able to deploy that across essentially any area and under any situation and in any context. That being kind of just a high-level overview of several different theories that fall into that information processing view on skill acquisition, motor learning. And then the other being more of an ecological approach to learning, specifically ecological dynamics, where it's underpinned by ecological psychology. So that organism or performer, actor, environment relationship, to where they have that mutuality or that reciprocity between the two, in addition to nonlinear and dynamical systems. So it makes up what is known as ecological dynamics. And essentially you have a performer or the individual or whoever it may be that you're working with, yourself or other, the task and the environment. And those three coalesce together and or essentially confluent, and they're never separated. And that's how perception and action coupling occurs, and that's how actions are essentially deployed with respect to the problem and what information is in that particular problem. So wildly different views of motor learning and skill acquisition. So essentially the way I like to describe it in a really simplistic manner is rather than telling someone how to do everything, you're guiding them to have an opportunity to find it themselves. That way they have a better connection.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, I would say that the way that I might describe it and the way that based off the education I received in my, a good way that I was related to is when I went through my master's program, the instructor, the professor that we had that guided us through a speed, agility, and quickness course. In there, he dived into some of these topics, talking about motor learning, talking about skill acquisition, how an athlete will process information and the outcome of those. So when I think about what you guys are doing, I essentially think about almost brain training for athletes. I know that that's very general right there. And, you guys dive deep into it and, with the environment and the tasks at hand. But when you think about sport performance, essentially, every sport is caused by some type of stimuli, whether it's a ball coming at them, an opponent. And a lot of what we see, or what we used to see in sport performance, was an athlete being trained like everybody else, or, maybe they're just doing traditional strength training. And that skill acquisition part of it, the reaction component, was not really there. And so how do we get our athletes to respond quicker, to, be able to read an environment? And that's the kind of stuff that I think hopefully it goes more towards as this information becomes readily available for the general population, personal trainers, strength coaches, all the different types of career paths out there. So correct me if I'm wrong. The area that I would say that kind of is a good starting point is maybe with just thinking about agility training. Is that kind of where, someone that's maybe just a personal trainer and they're thinking, okay, I want to get more involved with this type of information and training, for them, would you kind of guide them towards first kind of maybe take a course or some type of seminar that talks about the difference between agility and change of direction, all that kind of, that realm right there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that that's a pretty good place to start, being the fact that if you peel back the layer on, there is a difference between change of direction, speed, and agility.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to kind of peel those layers of the onion back and realize that there's more to it and it's deeper than that. And that's where you get into information in the environment and how do I actually, as the individual, connect to that information, or if I'm working with an individual or individuals, how do I help them connect to that information. And so when you look at change of direction speed, something that is pre-planned and can be, initiated by the performer at any given time, versus it being agility, which is where you are, having a change of velocity or a change of direction in addition to the information that is in the environment, to where you are, moving off of an opponent, or there are other obstacles that are in place where you actually have something that is in response to, and you're having to connect to that information, versus it being just pre-planned in nature, such as in change of direction speed. And not saying that change of direction speed can't be beneficial and there isn't a place for it. There certainly is, from dampening of impact forces and tissues, modulation, and different things that you can do to aid in an athlete's development or an individual's development. But for the sake of specifically speaking to sport movement skill development, agility is something that is far different. And to give you a really easy example, American football is my number one sport. Love a lot of sports, but that's my number one sport. American football would be an example of agility. The combine, which is obviously for the NFL combine for the NFL, is completely different. Mm-hmm. It's almost a separate sport of itself. It is much more of a change of direction speed and single effort power output, explosion movements such as the vertical jump, broad jump, things of that nature. So those are widely different. And we have something that's decontextualized, such as the NFL combine, versus something that is actually occurring within its own context as American football. And so when you start to look at, there is something different in agility, and change of direction speed can be beneficial. When can I use this? That's where you start to realize, wow, there's a lot more. And then you start going down that rabbit hole there. But yeah, I like that place to start, just simply because it allows people to see there's something different. And it's also enjoyable to actually go through perception and action coupling work and agility work. That's actually something I just presented at not less than 2 weeks ago at the Idea World Convention in Anaheim. And so that's kind of the area and the direction that I go. Is I predominantly work with athletes, but I have spent numerous years in the personal training, general fitness world, whether I was probably at that time 90% clientele that had, whether it was cardiovascular risks and or diseases at the time, whether it was somebody that had, let's call it dysfunctional movement. There's different ways to describe that. Let's say it's someone that's wanting to gain weight, lose weight, whatever it may be. I've spent numerous years in that field. And that's where maybe you can have more of that change of direction speed that lives. But the comment that I've gotten back quite often from individuals ranging from youth all the way to individuals in their 80s and 90s is that's more fun. I enjoy that. And so let's be honest, we want to have fun too. And specifically when we're working with individuals that are hoping to better their lives and create something that is better for their families, then that's something we want to attach to it.
Awesome. Good stuff. Really good stuff. And so the area where, you and I got in contact was through a company called Kettlebell Concepts. They make live workshops for personal trainers. And from what I know, you have been almost around the world. What kind of led you to Kettlebell Concepts, incorporating kettlebell training into your work, and kind of maybe even touch on the places that you've been to?
Yeah, absolutely. That's you start describing that, and no different than whenever we're talking about sport movement skill, which I'm sure the listeners out there can tell I get a little excited about that. So I do not apologize, but just a little bit. But I get equally as excited about the kettlebells, and the reason why is a lot of people enjoy seeing different places and being able to help other people, and kind of combining two loves of a lot of people. And not everybody loves to travel, but a lot do. And so to continue along that journey, after I decided to hang up the NFL, opportunities, or they hung it up for me, I
Mm.
should say, that I was like, well, I was in graduate school and I was coaching and loving it, but I was like, I just don't know if I want to move around the country my entire career. And so just under 1 year I spent at the collegiate level there, Division II school there at Northeastern State. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, but realized that I was looking to make some money. And so I stopped graduate school at the time and I accepted a position working for 24 Hour Fitness. And I've worked a number of different roles in the company, but most of the time that I spent there was as a fitness manager. And I helped out a lot of the other neighboring clubs in the downtown San Francisco area
Mm.
as well. But I ran our North Beach location right there, kind of Fisherman's Wharf, Italian district area. And so to answer your question of how I came into kettlebell training, they were just kind of coming back into popularity again in the early to mid 2000s. And I'd been aware of them, but I hadn't really started to gravitate towards them yet, mainly because I knew they were uniquely different. You can just tell simply by looking at the center of gravity and where it's displaced based off of where your hand is going to
Mm-hmm.
be. And so what I did instead was I attended several workshops that were in the area. A couple of different organizations that were there, such as RKC and WKC was there at the time. And so just kind of getting a feel what that looked like, not the actual full certification course or certificate course, but a chance to kind of see what it looked like. And there were some positives from it, but I'm very nonlinear in general with how I look at things. And I look at things as being able to have multiple solutions to different problems. And so rather than being rigid and there's one way to do something, I look at it differently than that. So I started to seek out like what else is out there. And one of the guys that actually worked at the gym there with me at that time, and then a handful of others were also using them, he turned me on to a company called Kettlebell Concepts. And I was like, I think I've heard of that company. And I'd heard of them because they were the second company ever founded, within the kettlebell world,
Mm-hmm.
call it. They just weren't as widely known simply because you have to have a degree and or a major certification to even take the course, which I like just because I feel like there needs to be at least some foundation in order to come into something where you're expected to be able to go help other individuals. It's not just about the practicality of something. So I was working there in San Francisco, easy convincing here, but convinced my staff to come down with me to Miami. And I took my level 1 course down there with the director of education at the time and fell in love with the fact that there was a multiple opportunity approach with, let's call it, more stable positions or stable patterns, but stable in the uniqueness of that particular
Mm-hmm.
individual. So it wasn't like you have to do it this way. It was, here are some opportunities that may be more beneficial for you. Now let's take that self-guided journey. And that self-guided journey being the coach there is a facilitator that is providing those, a friend of mine put it just recently, handrails, but not handcuffs. And so with that, that was back in 2008. And I won't tell the detailed story of kind of how I became, the international representative for Kettlebell
Mm-hmm.
Concepts unless time allows. But I have been very, very fortunate. So back in 2014, I earned the opportunity to go
Yeah.
to China on a 3-week tour. And we were in 6 different cities, Shanghai for the master instructor camp, following the 6 different
Wow.
locations. And, and it gets really small when you're overseas. For those of you who out there listening, when you, and Tyler, you're very well aware, you get overseas and it's, you do at least an adequate job or a very good job with a country. And there happens to be somebody from Taiwan there. And then they want to, bring us over. And then there's someone there from Japan. And then next thing you know, you're in Thailand. And I've had the opportunity to do this just outside of the pyramids
Wow.
in Egypt. And I've had an opportunity to do this just outside of the Great Wall in China and other amazing countries. And so it's been a team journey and a team effort. But Kettlebell Concepts, to maybe the U.S. population, not known, is arguably the largest in Northeast Asia, if not one of the most popular in all of Asia, as far as a kettlebell company and the education that we provide. So it's been a wonderful journey. Still, obviously, I'm involved. The company actually will be leaving here in just shy of a month and going to be going back to China and Taiwan for KBC and for my own personal
Very
company
cool.
as well.
Very cool stuff. Great stuff. And you touched on so many different points there that, our audience will want to know about, how you got there and all that kind of good stuff. But, I know that you've also worked as a consultant for Lifetime Fitness and working with different personal trainers, whether it's a fitness manager, a kettlebell instructor, or even just a general coach. What type of advice can you give entry level trainers about the fitness industry? They just got their certification. They're bright eyed. They're ready to start training people. What's the kind of advice that, from everything that you've gone through and your perspective, what's some great advice that you can give them?
Tyler, I really appreciate that question, mainly because I feel like that there's, I think, everybody can tell that I feel like there are numerous paths to get to, there's more than one road that leads to Rome, right? So with that, I think the biggest thing is not attaching after you've gotten that certification or gotten that degree is not simply attaching yourself to one person and or one company, even though that may be a good person and a good company, to be around and be exposed to and experience the type of teaching and coaching that occurs from numerous individuals just to see what isn't being said. And that might be a positive thing. There might be a reason why sometimes there's not that level of communication that's there between that performer and that individual coach. What is being said that's beneficial. So essentially, like, what language is occurring? What are the interactions like? What are some things that allow you to see this from a different lens rather than it just being the organizing body that you have your certification through, which is wonderful, whether it be the university that you obtained your degree from, because let's face it, we're getting information that is from one or just a few individuals versus it being spread over a handful. And I feel like that's important because that allows us to take our own beliefs and kind of start to see how that may fit within the world whenever we are working as a personal trainer, strength conditioning, sport movement skill coach. I think that'd probably be my number one. And then one of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein is, once you stop learning, you start dying. And obviously the first one speaks to that. But what I mean by that is I encourage everyone to at least 20 minutes a day. It could be a podcast. It could be reading a magazine. It could be reading a book, hopefully something that is a little bit peer reviewed, or at least most of the time. And then also having that practical in nature, just, reaching out to people. I think a lot of the listeners will be surprised. I reached out to Dr. Stuart McGill one time. He responded almost immediately. He was like, "Oh, no charge. Don't worry about it. Give me a call." And we all can't do that. But at the same time, there are times where maybe it's 10 minutes that you get with someone and just soaking it up, being very grateful for the opportunity, and then taking that and applying it in your own unique way. And so that part to me is what is probably the two biggest things that stand out outside of your regulars, which are attending major events, which are making sure that you're getting more certifications, things of that nature. I think it's the experiencing it, almost like a tradesman would do or an apprentice would do growing up underneath someone.
Before I circle back to all that good stuff you said, once you said Dr. Stuart McGill, of course my eyes lit up there, and I got a story to share with our listeners. I had myself a little bit of a fanboy experience with when you become entrenched in the industry. You're reading research, and at the last FitnessFest convention, Dr. Len Kravitz was there, and I'd gone up to the owner of FitnessFest, and I said, "Hey, where's Dr. Kravitz going to be?" And she's like, "Oh, do you want to meet him?" And like kind of like looking at me like, "You want to meet him?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to meet him." Like, I've read his research. Right. I've known who he is since, my undergraduate. Can I meet him? And she's like, "Yeah, come on." And she took me over to where he was going to be speaking for his seminar. And I honestly thought I'm pretty sure he thought that I was just an attendee. But, my badge was flipped over, and it would have said that I'm a sponsor of the convention and that I was speaking at the convention. But I probably came across as, some beginner trainer. But I was just just so excited just to see him, shake his hand. And, same thing kind of. We started talking about education, and we talked a little bit about the research that I'll be working on for my PhD. And he just flat out just gave me advice there. And that's the kind of stuff that you see across many popular instructors, educators. They're just so willing to give free knowledge right there on the spot. It's not, a money thing to them. It's how can I give back to the industry that has given them so much? And, these are some of the biggest names, some of the biggest educators, and they're just so willing just to, yeah, sure, let's talk right now. And let me give you some free knowledge, which is amazing to see within the industry. But
That's
sorry,
awesome.
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just think that's fantastic. I obviously, everyone in this industry, including the people that have been in it for a while, have to make money. But at the same time, so
Yeah.
many have given so much, and so even if it's just 10 minutes, 15 minutes here and there, I think that's what it's about. And I'm a big fan of Bruce Lee, and one of my good friends is even a bigger fan. I mean, we're talking T-shirts on a regular basis and the whole nine. But I say that only because it's not like everything. Going back to what I'd mentioned earlier about being maybe anchored to one company or anchored to one individual. That's fine to have someone that is more the person that you gravitate towards. But I love the Bruce Lee: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely your own. And I say that simply because we can pick up so much from so many, and to have those experiences like you had are fantastic. And I think for younger learners out there and for younger coaches out there, and obviously we were both in that realm. It was just like, how much can I absorb? And I realized at an early age I knew absolutely nothing, and I get humbled on a regular basis. A couple of the friends that I follow on Twitter, they were posting about the international Perception and Action conference that just happened in the Netherlands just this past weekend. And I'm just like reading some of the threads on there and like, oh my gosh, there's so much out there I don't know. But I think that's what's exciting about it. I think it's not that we need to be overwhelmed because we're never going to know everything. I think it's that we take what we can and we add what is our unique quality to it. And then we have that relationship, and that's what it's about. Those interactions are so crucial, not only from like in the ecological dynamics skill acquisition way that we were talking about just a bit earlier, but also just on that individual level. And I look at it, as a learning system, and it's a two-way street of communication. And so that's a special thing.
I think with kind of bringing all that together, the ability to just be open to new information, I think that's even a skill to be learned. I know that from my own experiences coming into the fitness industry, I would say I was more open than some, but at the same time, I got my first personal training job at a very fancy upscale health club, not a gym, a health club. And being in that type of situation and being able to work with different professionals, I thought that, at the time, I had it, I got it. But, at the same time, you realize years later on that, okay, you were just, 19, 20 years old, and you had this great opportunity. You probably should have took it even further, been open to more education. And I think that ability just to be open to information will bring you so much more in return. You'll seek it out. You'll want to take certificates. You'll want to learn from other great fitness professionals. All these different items will start just opening up to you because you'll be able to see them instead of being closed off from them, which is such a skill that some know, some learn later on, but it's so beneficial in the end in terms of being able to be a quality personal trainer. We're never going to be the best, the greatest, but you can just continue to strive towards that, which I think is something that a lot of people will learn maybe 2 months after being in the industry, 3 months, a year, whatever that might be, but it's something really great. With your speaking and all the kinds of conferences you go to, that you attend, you speak, all that kind of stuff, what is typically the topic that you go to and speak about?
Number one, which is, it's a similar, a little bit different name depending on the conference that we'll craft the name behind, but it's essentially like guiding skill adaptation is probably the one that I've presented the most. And kind of going back to, are we actually ever acquiring something completely, or are we continually adapting to our environment? And so that's kind of the idea behind that. And so whenever I'm at an Idea World or a FitnessFest, and like being at a conference that is directed more towards the awesome general fitness in public, I do gravitate towards more that agility versus change of direction speed. So a lot of the stuff is agility activities that are put together to where people have fun, but they're also learning to navigate their environment, and their environment that's rather complex and intertwined. And so that's kind of the direction I go there mainly. Also laying down some of the underpinning principles of motor learning and just motor control in general. And then whenever it's at a sporting conference or whenever it is at, there's lots of different amazing small little venue places across the country that are at sport performance facilities. I am usually there going a combo route. I've done a handful this year to where it's a 45-minute kind of discussion lecture on the underpinning principles, followed by 45 minutes of how that can be adapted to sports in general. And then whenever you start looking at sports, you start looking at what information's in the environment. So now it needs to be more representative of that actual sport, or hopefully more representative of the actual sport for more retention and transfer to occur, or more learning to occur. And that's not to say that there can't be exploration, because when we explore our options, that's whenever we start to connect to more information in the environment. So with that being said, it kind of goes more towards the sport realm, but using the same underpinning principles, or more towards just almost what would look like games and agility in general. And so that's kind of probably been the main one. And then I still have my love for kettlebell training. And so I won't ever let that die off. I mean, having something that has an extended center of mass that's constrained to rotate around an axis, or essentially feel like it's going to take you on a walk whenever you're swinging it sometimes or cleaning it. It's just fun, And then for people who are looking at, they're like, I want to have just a better feeling body, better looking body. Having that AK-47 per se of fitness equipment, such as the kettlebell, outside of the human body, is something I've always gravitated towards. So, guiding skill adaptation, number one, and then anything to do with kettlebell training and kettlebell performance after that.
So we've talked about your beginning, how you started, middle part with kettlebell concepts, traveling, teaching. So where are you now? Tell the listeners where you're at now, kind of your position, and what that kind of entails right now.
Well, I've been pretty blessed as of late. I have a lot of wonderful things, scary in some ways, in good ways, coming up. But I also like to embark on new endeavors that are rather challenging. My number one new project, I'm a co-founder of a company called Emergence. So essentially coming to light or coming to existence. And from a really in-depth way, it's essentially independent component parts that come together to form a different whole. So emerging into something that wasn't there initially. And that being from a complexity, skill adaptation standpoint. So kind of going back to that sport performance realm. And so the company that's founded, myself, a couple good friends of mine, Sean Mishka being one, Garrett Boyum, Jared Sigmund, and Michael Zwiefel, the five of us, we have put this together. It is a course that is going to be coming online here within the next 6 weeks. And we are actually filming on Sunday the first course, which will be available online for purchase. But then we have several different tiers to it, whether it's Zoom calls that we're offering, speaking at sessions and at delivering sessions, and speaking at conferences, as well as intensive mentorships. And so that's my biggest new endeavor that I'm involved in. It's been something that I've been very passionate about for a long time, and I'm blessed to be around some other amazing individuals. And we're looking to help coaches and help not only, when I say coaches of all realms, so sport coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, skill acquisition coaches, or just anybody who wants to understand more about how human movement actually occurs, for anybody that loves to learn. And so that's my number one project as of right now, especially being the fact putting together a lot of content for that. And the second thing, which I'm full-time at, but I'll come into more of a full-time role here in about 6 to 8 weeks once everything is launched with Emergence, is I'm the co-director of sport performance, or some like the term athletic development, either one, at a company called Starters Sports Training, which is here in the Twin Cities area, along with a gentleman by the name of Rich White. And we work with youth all the way to collegiate to pro athletes, baseball, softball, and football predominantly. And so right now I'm only spending about 15, 20 hours a week there as I'm finishing up a lot of the content before we go live with Emergence. And then you had mentioned Lifetime earlier. I still do consult for Lifetime. Worked for them for quite some time as an education development specialist for them at their corporate office. Great company. Just parted ways simply because I had this burning desire to create Emergence and be involved with a sporting company exclusively again, but still involved with them. And then I'm very fortunate to teach for Kettlebell Concepts and be involved with Kettlebell Concepts. And then I also teach for two other companies, Evidence-Based Fitness Academy, Dr. Emily Splickel, who owns that company, as well as Naboso. So speak for her as well. And then Stroops. So elastic bands, or Solastics as they term them. They're essentially tethered bands that have different anchoring points and allow the individual to move at the speed of life. So I don't like to anchor to too many different specific like equipment companies. But at the same time, I like being involved with people who care about learning. And then I like having stuff that continually challenges me to be more beneficial and be a better person, better helper, I guess, for anybody that I come in contact with, whether that may be someone that's playing in the NFL, CFL, or NCAA ranks, or whether that's someone that's looking to lose
Very
more
cool
weight
stuff.
so they can be around for their kids.
All the, one, I know you're a fantastic educator, and you see, with all the knowledge that you've acquired, the opportunities that have opened up with several companies. And I think that shows our listeners, education is such a valuable tool that opens so many doors for you. And, when they listen to this, they take it home, they start researching all these different companies and the opportunities out there. It just shows that you can start in that different path. Something might come up, a risk might happen here or there, but sometimes you just got to jump into it and, follow what you're really passionate about. And here's a great example of how someone took education and really just ran with it. You ran with it with whatever position you were at. You just put your feet down and just kept going with it. And you've built some great opportunities for yourself. So Tyler, I want to thank you. Can you give our listeners also some information about where to find you, where to find these different companies that you're working with, and even maybe your next speaking opportunity?
No, absolutely. First off, before I do that, I want to thank you so much, Tyler, for having me on. Obviously, we've known each other for some time now, and it's been awesome to be involved. And so I greatly appreciate everybody that's listening, or will listen, I should say, and just the opportunity to be on and share a little bit about it. Because I think the biggest thing is it's about being able to be connected to a variety of different people, and obviously being to the point to where you're upfront, open, honest, and everything. But to your point of like taking opportunities and just doing what you can with them, and always realizing that it's not always about what am I going to get out of this. I mean, certainly there's just as human nature, like we're hoping that we're able to take care of ourselves, but it's what can we do for other people? So that part is crucial. As far as social media, at Tyler Yearby, my name, TYLERYEARBY. And so, at TylerYearby.com, or excuse me, at Tyler Yearby for the different social media sites. And then Emergence, we actually, funny you asked that, we just created the social media accounts today. It's actually Emergent MVMT. So at Emergent MVMT. And we will be going online, probably live in about 6 weeks-ish with our website there. And I'll be posting on the social media sites there. So whether it's at Tyler Yearby or whether it is at Emergent MVMT. And so I also have my own website that I can be reached at, which is tyinspiremovement.com. tyinspiremovement.com. That's another place that I can be reached. And so I'm happy to do what I can and help where I can. And as far as the next speaking engagements, I just came off of quite a few. So my next one's in 3 weeks. I'll be, I think I mentioned I'll be in China for about a week, and then I'll be in Taiwan for about a week, and then a short jaunt in South Korea, and then headed home.
Go ahead.
And then the U.S. In the U.S., I believe the next one after that that's currently scheduled may be in September in Denver at Push Gym for Kettlebell Concepts, and then FitnessFest events in October. Excuse me, not FitnessFest event. I'll hopefully be there soon, but a SCW fitness events in Chicago, Midwest Mania.
And hopefully I'll see you in December with them. So all good stuff. Tyler, again, thank you for coming on, telling the listeners about your journey, about who you are, and just showing them, a different path. So I can't thank you enough with that. And thank you, everybody, for taking a listen to the Fitness Fest podcast. My name is Tyler Valencia, and I was your host for today. Have a good one, everybody.